What is going on, everybody? I am AJ, and I'm going to give my last-minute thoughts on UFC Vegas 19. We got a little over 2 hours before the event starts. I was just, sitting around, didn't want to be lazy, and so I wanted to get on here. Just wanted to kind of like update you guys on where my head's at. Obviously, some news has broken since the last time I sat down and did a podcast, so wanted to kind of just share my updated thoughts. My thoughts on the slate as a whole don't change all too much. We'll talk about some things. Obviously, that's why I'm doing the podcast. But the fight that got scrapped, Alves and Sabatini, was interesting. It's actually really hilarious for me that I thought that the fight was actually going to take place at lightweight. I just assumed it was at lightweight because Alves is just very muscular for the lightweight division standards. So to imagine, that guy cutting an extra 10 pounds was just, it seemed like a reach from my perspective. But they tried it, and we saw what happened. But it's all good. For DFS perspective, I wasn't too heavily invested in that fight. I was a little interested in both sides, I guess a little bit, because Sabatini was like a live underdog, and Alves, even though I wasn't a huge fan of his style for DFS scoring, he did have one of the better finish props on the card. He was on like plus 130 or so. It doesn't matter a whole lot, obviously, because the fight's scrapped now. But obviously, we had some weight misses in the meantime, and so I'd like to kind of just share my thoughts, not just on these fighters specifically, but in general. I don't really factor in weigh-ins all too much. To me, the most compelling thing of a matchup to me is the stylistic matchup. Weigh-ins, I feel like, is a lot of noise. Obviously, I note when somebody say doesn't look great on this scale, but to me, it seems like a reach for me to sit here, look at somebody on the scale, and then go, based off how they look on the scale, okay, they're going to look great in there, or they're going to look worse than we did before. It just feels like a lot of unnecessary noise. And again, I think it's not completely irrelevant. I think it's noteworthy. But for me to flip-flop my pick on a matchup just because something happened at weigh-ins, to me, it's not exactly my style. And again, I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but that's just how I operate. We had some weight misses, like Caitlin Vieira, for instance. She obviously didn't look herself up there. But then again, it still seems like a reach for me to say, oh, well, now Vieira is not going to be able to land takedowns or whatever the case may be. Maybe her cardio is a little bit worse. Maybe her durability is a little bit worse. But this is, again, me saying maybe. It's more so a theory rather than fact. I could say fact based off what we see on tape, right? That is factual evidence to back up a claim. Excuse me. But what we're going off what we see at weigh-ins, that's more so where we're just kind of theorizing, right? We're just kind of speculating, okay, how does this fighter look based off what we've seen at weigh-ins? And for me, there's just no way that I could quantify that. Maybe you can, but for me personally, it's just not something I factor in all too much. So obviously there was Vieira, there was Gordon. But again, I still think that those matchups are pretty similar to me, to be honest. I just touched on the Vieira thing. She's got to, likely land takedowns here. I think Yana's actually kind of live, to be honest with you. I think the odds are a bit wide. Again, I'm not taking the underdog shot on Yana because at the end of the day, I still do cap Vieira as the favorite. But with like Gordon, Chavez, for instance, these two guys got in each other's faces at weigh-ins. I loved it. It's going to be an awesome fight, I think, or it could be a quick finish, right? But with Gordon missing, I don't know if you saw the documentary, the Fight Island Declassified, but it was highlighted in that documentary. Gordon, he does have a tough cut to featherweight, and it was hard to watch the guy go through what he had to go through, and for him to do that every time is just I would wish nobody would have to do that. It's just such a tough thing to go through, and we know Gordon in the past has fought at lightweight. So honestly, it's kind of interesting that he missed by a few pounds rather than maybe just say if he missed by like a few ounces, that would maybe imply that, he tried so hard, but, his body just maybe gave out on him. But, missing by a few pounds may suggest, and again, this is more so a theory rather than fact, that, maybe at one point, during the weight cut that they thought, this is just not healthy to cut any more weight. Let's just stop it right here and weigh in at whatever, 150 or whatever. But again, it's more so a theory. The matchup to me is still the same type of deal. I think Gordon will still do what he always does. He's going to try and break you with his pace and pressure in his wrestling. I don't know why all of a sudden we would just see a different version of him. We've seen him so many times in there to know that that's how he fights. I don't know that, just seeing how he looked on the scale again to hammer home that point is going to all of a sudden suggest that, Gordon's just going to go out there and just fight totally differently than what we're used to. Again, maybe it affects his cardio, maybe it affects his durability, but again, it is still a maybe. It is still a theory, right? So those matchups still to me are the same. I like that fight for DFS. I do think that, there are two outcomes that I think are somewhat likely. Chavez could go out there and win by knockout, which in his case would be a strong DraftKings score, especially if it's early. Or Gordon always scores well on DraftKings when he wins, right? It's because, like we talked about, the pace, the pressure. Gordon always comes forward. He throws a lot of volume. If you're a DraftKings player, this new scoring system benefits a fighter like him with the non-significant strikes and control time, like we saw in that last fight against Fishgold, and even in other wins, right? So to me, those matchups don't really change all too much based off what I saw from weigh-ins. Again, it's noteworthy. I don't want to just completely throw it to the side and be like, oh, it's nothing. But to me, it doesn't change my pick on a matchup just based off what I've seen at weigh-ins. It's just still kind of noise. It's just still kind of narrative-y. I want to, when I get on here and give my predictions, I want to back them up with evidence, concrete evidence to suggest, hey, this is what we could expect out of this fighter, or what we could likely expect. They go out here and they've fought this sort of way or these sort of ways in their previous however many fights, 5-10 fights in the UFC. We have a sample size to suggest that, rather than looking at a weigh-in, which, let's be honest here, takes you, again, the weight cutting process is long, but to actually, from our perspective, see the fighters step on the scale for like a minute, couple minutes, again, at most, that's a really small sample size. We've got, hours of footage of some of these fighters on tape that we could go to, right? So to me, it's another example of recency bias. It is recency bias. And again, I'm not saying I'm not susceptible to it too. I'm just trying to, bring it to light, just say, to justify, this is why I think some people emphasize a lot what they see at weigh-ins. And again, there's nothing wrong with looking at it. I watch the weigh-ins too. I love the stare downs. I think that now that we've got the face-to-face interaction, again, I think that, definitely brings back, some kind of old memories. And, I pointed out the Chavez and Gordon instance. They got in each other's face. I love it. So again, there's nothing all too much else. I did add the two bets that I posted on Twitter with my breakdowns. I posted them as is because I already did a breakdown in the main event. That was one of my bets. I bet Curtis Blades 5.5 points handicap. So if you're unfamiliar with that bet, that basically means that for it to cash, Curtis Blades has to either win inside the distance or he needs to win a decision, but it needs to be by more than 5.5 points on the judges' scorecards. So if he goes out there and gets 49-46 on one card and then 48-47 on the other, or excuse me, that's wrong. If he gets 49-46 times 2 and then 48-47 for Blades, then the bet cashes. Basically, any point total on the judges' scorecards that favors Blades, that's more than 5.5 points, that's where the bet will cash. And I made the same bet with Jamal Emmers at it's plus 3.5, and it's a plus number because the money line for that bet was plus money, whereas the Blades bet was minus money. So if you're thinking about a point spread in like football or NBA, the plus or minus is just going to depend on what the odds suggest. But it's basically the same thing. Emmers needs to go out there and get 29-27 on one card or 29-28 on the other two, or better. And I like that bet for him. And these props didn't get released until today. I was looking at them for the past 2 days. I couldn't find them on the book that I use mainly. Try to keep refreshing. I couldn't find them. But thankfully here a couple hours before fight time, which, I wanted to get these out as soon as I noticed it and whatnot, is definitely reasonable. If it was like last minute, maybe 10 minutes before the event, I wouldn't be doing it. But thankfully it got released rather quickly here. So yeah, there's nothing else too much to take away. I've been listening to other people's opinions. Like I pointed out in my little article there, MMA betting principles 101. I do my homework, I do my research, but I don't listen to everybody's opinion until after I'm done with that, because I do love to listen to everybody's opinion, but I also want to be selective as to when I want to hear it, just so it doesn't, sway my judgment after my decisions are made, my bets are placed and so forth. So, I think there's a lot of great content out there. I know we've got only a couple hours before the event, but yeah, I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for your time. This is a little quick thing. Let me know what you guys think of this. Would you like me to do more of this, like last minute final thoughts? It would go on for around this time, perhaps a little high in the future. So feel free to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button below, and please feel free to leave a comment as well. You could also follow me on Twitter at AJ_SCHULLO. Thank you and have a nice day.